Thank you very much for the Ministry for inviting Asian Development Bank to this event. We're delighted to be here. We have a very large delegation from ADB headed by our Director General also is here. So very happy to be back in India and sharing our experience. As the Joint Secretary was mentioning, the pressure on urban areas is so large and the volume of people who are migrating into large cities. In fact, even before I will finish this slide, there could be new data that shows how much people are moving in. So the context of how much housing is required is really mind-boggling, needs to say. So in this context, as affordability was being mentioned, one of the biggest challenges, if you look at affordability, for a large segment of urban population, which is really at the bottom of the pyramid, even an affordable housing is simply beyond their reach. If you look at from loan to value, the amount of equity that is required for these migrant workers, poor migrants who are coming into working these areas, means that it's simply not possible for them to actually get into ownership. And if you look at the affordable housing companies that look at the amount of financing that's required or the interest rates, again, it makes it very, very difficult for them to make this even into the affordable housing segment. As a result of that, most of them resort to rental housing. And as we've been talking about, the rental housing has been fairly mixed in terms of the results that you're looking at. And therefore, even where there is available, the quality is a significant challenge. It is in this context that as we're starting to look at more migrant population moving into tier 1 and tier 2 cities in India, corridors being developed, state policies and federal policies that are coming up to support rental housing. With increasing women workforce that's coming in, a big issue is how do we ensure safe and secure accommodation for them. Other workers, migrant workers, IT workers, means that there is a large segment of population that's going to get benefited by having a rental housing. So it was with this context that we started, along with World Bank, working with the Tamil Nadu government, looking at how we actually provide solutions for rental housing. And what we did was we worked with what was then called the Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board, now called Tamil Nadu Urban Habitat Development Board, to develop housing for people who are living in these informal settlements, mostly in very climate vulnerable locations along river banks, canals and all, and develop a program that integrates their livelihood. And there were two parts to it. I will briefly talk about, mostly on the first one, I'll briefly introduce part 2, and then Krishna, who's the CEO of the TNIFMC, would discuss a little bit more about the shelter fund. The attempt on the traditional public model was to see how can we deliver long-term solutions that's more affordable but also sustainable. So therefore, we have designed operation and maintenance as part of the solution for delivering even at the public housing model. And the market capitalizing model is where the shelter fund comes in, and we have identified how using equity from the multilateral development agencies, we are able to deliver solutions through private sector participation. So if you look at the traditional model for housing delivery, the most important element, as most of the public sector agencies have looked at, is cost efficiency and speed. So monoblock designs, repeatedly possible, very quick to turn around, low-cost housing was what really the focus was, rather than looking at whether community space was being created or not. So that actually led to serious challenges all across the state. We had very high rates of crime, particularly against vulnerable population, huge amount of issues related to disease and eyesores in terms of this garbage disposal that was coming up, and encroachments right through. That was the operating environment through which we were brought in to try and develop a solution that was going to be completely redefining the landscape of how public housing to these low-income population was going to be delivered. And this is what we have actually tried to deliver. It took me one click to move from that to that, but Sita, an architect who's present here, will tell you the mind shift that took us from the first slide to the second slide was a huge amount of conversation that has to go on repeatedly over 18 to 24 months, trying to bring in design philosophy and why design philosophy also makes economic sense and actually important from a bankability point of view also. But what we have actually learned is that each subunit that we were developing, we started working on a number of projects at the same time. We took the learnings from each sub-project and we kept improving upon each as we moved forward, understanding what the community needs were, because we were able to map each of the community members. We knew exactly their names, their occupation, their personal situation, including if they had mobility issues, if they had accessibility issues. And so we were able to design solutions that were very bespoke to the needs of them. And more importantly, we also try to understand what kind of economic activities they were engaged in. And that meant that when we started to redesign our land use planning for the master planning for the zone, we really kept in mind what the community needed. So a typical monoblock that I showed in the beginning, which is the white structure, would have what generated, but we kept the same amount. The challenge was, can you deliver still 900 units with all the fancy items that you guys were talking to us and show us? That was the challenge thrown to Sita and to all of us to try and deliver that. And we're very happy that we were able to do that with very strong community participation, engagement with our key stakeholders to deliver something like this. That includes community space, various aspects, green spaces, and as if required, future development options too. The other important element, given that we were working in Tamil Nadu, meant that the wind patterns, the comfort of affordability, along with that was very issue. So we ran computational fluid dynamics modeling to understand how the wind patterns were. Solar radiation was looked into so that the shades of the buildings, the cutouts that needed to be done, was done in such a way that it was pleasant throughout the day. And based on that, then tree plantation and landscaping, not simply just putting grass, but actually looking at how plantation could actually happen was also considered. And then really the bottom line for us was that we were not designing or delivering housing. We wanted to deliver community living. That was really what most important. Anybody could have done housing, but what we were trying to do is really build a community space and give it back to the community in terms of how they would integrate much better than from where they were living. So very quickly, some slides that I want to just show some pictures in terms of how various urban utilities that are commonly required were put in, whether it was health center, Anganwadi centers, libraries, milk booth, clinics, and also because we knew which of our beneficiaries actually needed special care. In each of the buildings on the ground floor, there were units that were designed for universal accessibility. So that was another important area for us to focus on. And public spaces like parks, and other facilities, including sewage treatment plants. Yes, Dr. Sejal was talking about that. We've tried to integrate that, and we hope that in this one it works. Now, the other important element, and we've learned this from several other affordable housing projects that we've done in many countries, was often people would get relocated from locations where economic activities were not closely, and as a result of that, they would go back and relive in those slum areas as from where they were relocated. So working with BRAC, we adopted what we call as graduation policy. Simply put, the idea was that if we are bringing people from what we call as the sending sites to receiving sites, how can we work with them happily identifying opportunities for them to grow economically, and then develop a pathway for economic progress. So looking at economic activities that they were familiar with in the surroundings that they were doing, and can we integrate that into the economic well-being of them? And being that subsequently at a future stage, maybe the economic profile will change, that they actually can truly go into what we call as affordable housing segment, i.e. move into an ownership model. So it was more like a continuum that we were looking at. Bring them at the bottom of the pyramid, but work with them and see a transition that eventually that every urban dweller has a dream of owning a house could possibly be bring them to that. So that graduation policy has really helped us identifying specific site-related economic opportunities all across the state to develop that model so that they don't go back to where they were living. And secondly, what we've also done is develop a model for redevelopment and conservation of the spaces from where they were coming in so that there is no future encroachment that happens as well. Now, quickly moving on before I hand it over to Krishna. So the second part of the presentation is focusing on private sector-led delivery model. In this, what we've attempted is using ADB and World Bank's financing. We have brought together 92 million, including 22 million from the Tamil Nadu Housing Board. 92 million as an equity corpus into the Tamil Nadu Shelter Fund. And the idea is very simple. Can I use every dollar of my money or this money inside the shelter fund and deliver a 2 times, 3 times results for private sector investment? And the journey that we will briefly talk about in the next few slides really captures that as to how we have managed to leverage private sector experience, operation and maintenance, but also investment coming in, and using this 92 million as really a catalytic de-risking instrument to crowd in more private sector investment. So looking at rental housing within that context, 2 very quick models. One is industrial workers housing, which has both public and private sector, working with state agency called SIPCOT that some of you might be familiar with. So we've identified land. We are working with various industrial units which are located in these industrial areas and develop rental housing for the workers in those areas. And the interesting model here is the demand risk essentially is actually retained by these entities because they really need workers housing in the complex, and that means that they are willing to underwrite the demand risk, which actually helps us to achieve fairly good bankability returns for the private sector also. The second bit is where we've actually worked directly with private sector in the delivery model, where SPVs have been created, and we've taken a small portion of equity from the TNSF, the shelter fund, and dropped out into these equity. And sometimes we've got multiple leveraging from these, because the ability to de-risk that project means that we were able to realize commercial finance from that. So those are some of the models on rental housing, and in doing that, about 30% of that is also done towards ownership model as well, identifying mixed-use land use plans that Abhijit was talking about. So really being able to integrate that with the private sector aspect. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to hand it over to Krishna, who's going to talk about the shelter fund. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be part of the National Urban Conclave 2025, and wish to thank Mahua and especially Mr. Kuldeep Narayan for giving us this opportunity to present what we do. Sorry for the interruption. So, going back to what the Honorable Minister was mentioning about the accessibility of the urban infrastructure with, for the most vulnerable classes within the population, we want to present about our initiatives and our learnings with respect to the rental housing. Like Srinivas Sampath had mentioned, we also do for sale affordable housing, and even the rental housing. There is one model in rental housing that we are piloting with senior citizens, which is a senior living, which we will probably take it in some other session when we get the results. But today we are going to present 3 models about the rental housing platforms that we fund, and what have been our learnings and what are the initiatives that we have done. Thank you. This is who we are. We are a SEBI regulated CAT 1 fund. We are focused on affordable housing, and our objective is to deliver on the Housing for All initiative of the government. We have the government as a major investor. The government is also a shareholder in our fund. We are similar to NIF, where National Infrastructure Investment Fund, where 49% of us is held by the government. The government has nominees on the board. We have 2 independent directors who are experts in the space. One a retired CMD of a public sector bank, and one a retired chief risk officer of HDFC. And we have a nominee director from National Housing Bank, which is our second largest investor. We also have an independent investment committee through which all our proposals go through. The independent investment committee also has experienced individuals and professionals. The ex-CFO of TCS, the ex-ED of Foodco, who is also an urban planning expert, and a policy expert who is an ex-additional chief secretary. We are a professional team, and what we pride ourselves on is in our delivery and our execution. I think we can, okay. So, okay, the other, we just wanted to talk about the impact. We have, to date, delivered about 27,000 beds, and we believe that by the time the fund ends, which we have another 6 years to go, we should be able to deliver close to 1.75 lakh beds, and also in that whole process, support jobs and benefit women, because our focus has been more on the women's rental housing. And this is where we come to where we want to talk about what the Secretary Bahua was mentioning yesterday about quality, quantity, and execution. What we believe we have delivered is quality, which we will show in the subsequent slides, the quantity in the sheer number of projects, and the geographical spread with which we have delivered that in the time period that we have delivered in. And all our buildings are green buildings. And we wanted to, one other aspect that we wanted to mention is that as on date, Tamil Nadu has 50% urbanization. And this is the level of urbanization that we are looking at the country level within the next decade or so. All we wanted to say is some of the learnings that we have, coupled with more insights that can be brought in, can be a template for any future initiative which is similar to this. And this is the leveraging effect that ADB was talking about. We started off with a 658 crore fund. Today, the projects that we have as on date, which we had invested in and which are already operational or under construction, is more than 2,500 crores. We expect at a very conservative level that this will be close to 3,000 crores, and we believe that it could be even more than that. What this translates to is at least a 2.6 times leverage that we have achieved as on date, and more than 3 times leverage that we would be achieving over the period of, by the time we extinguish our fund. So this is a slide that, this may be a dense slide, but I'll just try to explain this in as simple terms as possible. This is also in line with what the Honorable Minister was mentioning yesterday about the cities and the projects being able to fund themselves. What we see to the right side of this slide is that there is already funding which is available. What we see towards the left is the projects. The government has always been an initiator and an accelerator of various initiatives, including the affordable housing. In fact, the government has, as on date, done more than its bit in terms of the Housing for All initiative, the PMIY and everything, with a very little participation from the private sector, which is to the right side of this slide. What we believe is that with a catalytic fund like ours, we also have the Urban Challenge Fund, which has been announced. And with catalytic funds like this, we believe that the leverage that we have shown in the earlier slide could be achieved. And that would be in line with the requirements. Yesterday, what I heard was about 80 lakh crores, which is required in this space. So the catalytic effect that we had done, which we had seen in the earlier slide, if it could be replicated again with the insights of the various people and more inputs and the customization that it is required, considering the different sectors, we believe that our learnings could be of some help. This is again something about what we were talking about, how we operate. We cater to, between us and what ADB speaker had mentioned earlier, we cater to 83% of the demand for housing, which is the EWS as well as the LIG. Our intention is to have initiatives which could drive in, or which could drive the cost of funding lower. And how do we do that? We do that by predictability and governance. We demonstrate predictable cash flows, which most investors yield. And that is where we believe some of our learnings could be of help. I'll skim through these slides quickly. These are the models how we have funded. And what is important to note is that this is our working women's hostel. This is the Tholi working women's hostel. Tholi in Tamil means Saheli. And we have about 39 of them across, as we had seen in the earlier slide, across the state. And these hostels are seeing demand, explosive demand, if I may say so, and they are self-sustaining. And this is what we wanted to demonstrate. If you see the upper right corner, what we do in this is that most of the land belongs to the government. It is recycling of some of the land which is there with the government. It is transferred to a special purpose vehicle, the Tamil Nadu Working Women's Hostel Corporation. We provide the funding. We ensure that the building is to the standards. All our buildings are green buildings, and it has the facilities which we will see in the subsequent slides. And once it is done, we give it to a private party only for facility management and ensuring that the various parameters are in place. And these parameters are on safety, hygiene, and comfort, as we can see. And that is why we see that this is the model where the private participation is only about 35%. And this is a comparison about how what we are doing and how we have differentiated, or how we have changed the game insofar as women's rental housing is concerned. What we have done is we have compared this to a private hostel, or what is colloquially called as PGs in the cities, where women who come from a far-flung area into a city and want to make a career for themselves, what are the how they are and what we provide. So these are some of the pictures. I'll skim through them quickly. And these are actual pictures of some of the hostels that we are operating. So it has the biometric access. We have CCTV, biometric access, and private security guards which ensure safety. So this is our private industrial housing model. And why is this important? This is important because a lot of places, there is a lot of attrition, or there is the industrial zones are so far away from work, and this is one of the walk to work model that we have created. We have this is one project which has 34,000 beds, maybe one of the largest in the country in a single location, and this provides safe, hygienic, and comfortable environment for women. And this is the factory which has more than 90% women, and after this, there has been studies which indicate that the attrition levels have gone lower, and the productivity levels have also gone higher. These are the pictures of the same facility, and this is how a room looks like, and this is the facility at a glance. Some more pictures of the same facility. We have some numbers associated with that. I don't want to go into those details because of the paucity of time. So this is the public housing model where we said that the private participation is 80%, but if you really look at it, we are private. What we have done is we have created a joint venture company. It's an equal joint venture between SIPCOT and our fund. And we also fund at multiple levels. We fund at the equity level, and we also fund the mezzanine debt. And over a period of time, once we consolidate, once we operate, we ask for, we will refinance with senior debt. In the earlier case, we had a large conservative foreign bank which has given competitive rate of interest for the project. So this is one thing that we wanted to mention from the first example of the city-facing working men's hostel. These hostels, the Tholi hostels, is where a lady comes to the city, she can go through an app and reserve a room for herself. And when we looked at how our numbers have been behaving, insofar as we have modeled conservatively at about 60% in the first year, 80% in the second year, and maybe 90-95% in the third year in our own financial modeling. But what we have realized with our operating hostels, and this is over 2,000 beds and multiple hostels, in the tier 1, in the metros, our occupancy from 0 to 100% is less than 6 months. In tier 1 cities, we have seen that it is taking about 12 months, but if you really look at it, by the time it is the 9th month, we are well over 90%. And it's the same thing which has been happening in the rest of the state, or in the tier 3 or more rural, not rural, but these are towns, small towns. And we see that the operations have scaled up far better than our expectation. What this implies is that there is intrinsic demand, and this is a demand which is yet untapped. And our intention is that once we are able to establish this, we will be able to demonstrate the predictable, resilient cash flows backed by good governance. This particular entity, we have ensured that there is a CEO and a CFO and an operating team from the market which is recruited, and they operate this facility. So this is another analysis that we have done, and we wanted to understand what is affordability. Now, when you look at what is affordability and how we can achieve, if we are, let's say most debt comes in about 7 to 10 years, senior debt, and if you put in your equity, and to ensure that we meet our operating expenses as well as our debt service obligations, the rental that we need to charge is over 12,000 rupees, and even if you are taking some kind of energy savings in terms of, let's say, charging consumer level tariffs on property tax and electricity rather than the commercial level, the difference is hardly 100-150 rupees. So, but however, if you move to the right, and this is where we come in with our own blended financing and our own structured financing, and that is what is bringing with some grants. We have been receiving grants from Mahua for our hostels. We are very thankful that that is contributing. If you can really see the level of grants that we are looking at, if we are only doing 60% of the funding, and with the rest coming from grants and the other incentives. And if you really take the concessions which are provided on energy and property tax, which we believe should happen over a period of time, considering the importance of rental housing, the tariff could be near the 3,500 rupees per bed per month. And that, we believe, is where the affordability is, and where with the facilities that you have seen earlier, and this tariff, I think it is very clear that the affordability meets comfort and convenience by means of some structuring that we could do. So these are some of the questions that are there for possibly later, and considering that both our investors, ADB and World Bank, are represented on this dais, we would want to take, I would want to invite them to take this further. But these are some of the areas where all of us, the state, the multilaterals, a fund like ours, and maybe the general public at large, with their demand, can come together and bring in affordability. Would want to invite Mr. Srinivas Sampath and take it further. Thank you.
So I'll just quickly run through two more slides. You gotta bear with me for 2 more minutes. The Joint Secretary was asking us a very interesting question. He said, look, you guys have done this in Tamil Nadu now. So what next? How do you start to look at which other states can look at it? So what we did was we looked at, and as Abhijit was also mentioning, there is an ongoing study that the World Bank is doing. And maybe during the Q&A time, perhaps Abhijit can discuss about that. So what we did was we looked at, what could be the operating principles or the prerequisites that could allow other states to look into some of this model. So essentially looking at what's the market available for that. Is there a large migrant population that comes in? Krishna was talking about the Tori model, which is basically for working women's hostels. So we're saying, okay, can the Tori, or koi saheli mil sakti hai kya Tori ke liye? So we're kind of starting to look at what kind of drivers, where are the women workers that are there? Where do we find large migrant population, and how do we create that kind of an ecosystem? What are the policy enablers that could come in? And that led us to looking into the Model Tenancy Acts, looking into what kind of rentals yields are possible in the marketplace for that. Is there even a ecosystem available in form of the ULB support that's available, as the master plan zonings that are available? And what kind of institutional architecture and financing? Is there a bank that is willing to look into? Is there an anchor investor that can come in and create this kind of alternate investment vehicle? And so what we did was we really kind of put it out more for a discussion point to say that's the kind of, what happened? There's one more slide which is not showing up. It's okay. So what we did was we put out the states that we thought probably could have opportunities for that, and a number of drivers like industrial areas in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana, even NCR region. We looked at and we kind of scored them, saying, look, this is opportunity for industrial workers, this is opportunity for working men also, and that's where we wanted to leave it so that we could have a more open discussion. And as I said, Abhijit's study, the World Bank study that he was mentioning, probably will also help us to identify future opportunities in this space. So with that, let me conclude. Thank you.